Yeah, maybe you could just talk a little bit about the circumstances that led you to become an artist.
Yeah, it's a long story. If you look for a certain kind of critical moment, it's hard to recall because it's more of a gradual process, you know. And some things became sort of important finally later on than I realized. Um, let me just prepare an interesting narrative for you, at least for the sake of the interview. Okay. A couple of years ago, I met my biological father, and I'd seen this man my whole life. Since I was 2.5 years old, my mother separated from him, and I had not seen him. It turned out that he was a painter, and he was a teacher. Okay. So really what I'm doing now is what he was doing. And I remember very, very young, one of the few memories he took me to his studio, in China. At that time, of course, he was painting kind of propaganda picture, but I remember these big paintings very well. And I was asking him questions, and so on. And that was that. And I remember telling people that my father was a painter. And I felt it was kind of special to say that. I don't know why, as a child. But that was the end of it. That was that. My mother didn't keep contact or even get a photograph of him. So that's that. I didn't come to art directly when I was a teenager. I was more interested in fashion, very interested in fashion, still today. Maybe not so much fashion, but clothing. Yeah. And I remember going into fashion design. Yeah, going into fashion design. At that time, my parents wanted me to be a kind of computer engineer, that sort of thing. But I went into fashion design, and we had figure drawings in these design courses. And I did very well with the figure, almost kind of there's a natural kind of insight to the body. The body is mobile. I wasn't interested in copying the body, so I was able to capture the body in motion, so on. Very, very economical means. So I thought maybe it's easy to become an artist. I wasn't very good at sewing, so. And my parents are happier also that I became an artist, so on. So I went to art school, University of Alberta. And an interesting education at that time because we were pretty much left alone, which was quite different than how we program the students today. And, I think looking back, this was the experience of being left alone and learning to live as an artist. Yeah. There were a few of us who was always in the studio just figuring things out. We had that time, because no one was telling us what to do. It was important. At that time, we would have liked more guidance, some projects or assignments, but we weren't given much of that, right? So all of these things sort of, gradually art took over. Really, it's your sense of value, who you are. If your work fail, you feel miserable, then pretty much you're an artist, right? I do a lot of things as hobby, like cooking, yoga. If I don't do well, it doesn't bother me. That's not me. I call my problems away cooking. But art is something different. If your work fails, you fail as a person. At some point, your value has changed. You realize that you are an artist. It's sort of becoming this center where you kind of define everything you do. So it was more like going to art school and gradually that sort of happened. Yeah.
That's interesting, beautifully expressed. I'm kind of curious about that question of failure and that as a definition of the importance of the activity that you've committed to.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, I guess that leads to the question, well, if it's failure and success in whatever register that works, then what is it that an artist does that can offer a gauge to this question of success and failure?
Are you talking in a kind of general sense, career sense, or artists in the studio?
I'm talking about artists in the studio,
In the studio.
and how this question of what is it that I'm doing becomes so important.
Well, what you're doing doesn't matter to anyone else. It's like, you know, who cares if you fail, right? Only to the artist it matters, you know. Yeah. And also when I look at other art that's succeeded, there's a motivation for me to at least emulate that, you know, that the world becomes larger somehow, you know, there's just more than you think, more potential, more goodness somehow, just more. And maybe another way to respond to your question is success and failure. Where do you draw the line in the studio when you're making a work, right? I guess what you're looking for, and there's a moment you say, okay, I can stop this work now, it's done. Somehow it means the work succeeded, you succeeded, you know? What is that criteria, you know, that, yeah. Everyone has different criteria, I found. Every artist will use different metaphors to locate that moment, right? Someone will say, for example, oh, the work is now can walk on its own, or something like that. Yeah. Maybe it's like, for me, it's like, oh, I can see myself in it. But myself is addressing me from the future. So that's me, but a little bit more ahead. So yeah, that's kind of good, you know. Then maybe I can stop. Yeah. Although, you know, when you live in time, you change the work you think is done. Then you realize maybe there's more you can do, which I actually sometimes go back to revise because I work digitally, right? So it happens a lot that I go back. Yeah. But it was that moment of illusion. Oh yeah, that's me from the future calling. That you can walk, you can live it. That's my criteria for success and failure, you know. Yeah. But I think every artist has to define that moment, you know, how it happened, when it happens, what they are looking for in work. Yeah.
What would you say you are looking for in work then, in the broader scheme of things, Jan? I guess you could call it the fundamental framework of the practice, or the core ideas that you feel you wish to see emerge work after work in whatever form. Can you articulate that?
I think, you know, I mean, when you wrote many grant applications and statements, you know, coming from undergrad to a professor now. Some years ago, I was sitting just upstairs, maybe about 4 or 5 years, or maybe more than that, 6 years ago, looking at the few objects that I made. And I was starting to do the kind of animation that sort of put me back to the exhibition circuit. I was sitting there by myself and looking, yeah, I think that the purpose of my work is to subtract weight from the world. So since then, there was just that one statement. The purpose of my work is to subtract weight from the world. That would be the quality that I'm looking for.
I'm going to read a quotation actually from David Court.
Okay, yeah.
And the quotation is this, and I wonder if you can comment on it. The apparent lightness of Lao's intentions necessarily invokes attention in the relationship between the material and the virtual.
I think he was maybe writing about my animation, the 3D kind of rendering of virtual space. Can you read it again about, this is about attention. This is about attention.
David Court wrote, the apparent lightness of Lao's intentions necessarily invokes attention in the relation between the material and the virtual.
Yeah, yeah. I think he is talking about a different kind of attention. I don't know if attention can be very diffuse as something that is mobile rather than something that is like a beam of light fixed on certain things. For me, the virtual and the actual, they're not distinct, perhaps. It's perhaps it's like a coefficient of curve, you know. One sort of flow and sort of unfold into the other. Maybe the attention that David is talking about is to grasp that process. Maybe a dynamic kind of transformation of the virtual being actualized. I think, yeah.
In another quote, not David's, the work has been described as unfolding like an architectural origami.
Yeah.
You want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, if you maybe call a lot of my animation involves architectural spaces that are somewhat fictional, some of them are real, but these architecture they're always in a state of formation, you know. They're floating in space. Somehow, sometimes they gather and configure themselves into some kind of sensible space that seems real, and then they depart from each other when the occasion is not required for them to be so. So there is that mobility of thinking about space as embodied by architecture as essentially mobile and always in a state of assemblage, but moving, you know. That has something to do with the virtual, I think, yeah.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, yeah. But that's one of the kind of recurring motifs in my animation, yeah. Or maybe in other works too, actually, yeah.
I wonder if you would speak to a particular work, and you may, of course, wish to speak to a different work. But I'm intrigued by the title of one work from 2013, which is "A World is a Model of the World."
Ah, okay. That, I think, is an exhibition title. It came from a Chinese poem, a Zen Buddhist poem, "The world is a model of the world." I'm always fascinated by a certain cosmological model of the universe, right? And the Buddhist one that I came to very young and fascinates me still is that they describe the universe as it's a god who casts a net, you know, net that is a grid, matrix. On every juncture, there is a pearl. Okay, this pearl is perfect, shiny. Every pearl reflects all the other pearl, and all the reflections into all the other reflections. It's a metaphor of universal interdependence, you know. The virtual actually precedes the actual. All we have is this diffusion of images and so on. So that fascinates me, and still kind of in the back of my mind, model that I operate on. Okay, so back to your question. This pearl, in each pearl, it's just a reflection of all the other pearl. They have something to do with what we call today in mathematics of kind of fractal geometry. You know, the model, it imitates itself. Oh, this is a question of mimetic, but it's a mimetic function that performs back to itself. So it becomes its own virtual state. Am I making some sense? Yeah. So that is that statement, the world is a model of the world, you know. It is, and it is virtual. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like to describe one of the works that would, in a sense, offer an example to the frame of reference that you see working across your practice?
One particular work? Well, maybe we can talk about the work called Lived Moments in Beijing, between the past and the present, which I appear in the work myself. First, I constructed the artist studio floating infinite space, and the stars and the moon. It's very romantic, hyper-romantic image. And then the studio, which is my home at the same time, our studio, scholar studio, fictional, it start to imitate itself by turning around itself. So in this sort of process of self-imitation, a space is created for the camera to go through. So the studio is constructed as this kind of volume that seems monolithic, but it's actually a mirror image of itself. Therefore, I can deploy this sort of operation of self-imitation. And in this process, there's new space, opening. So the camera can go through. Every time it imitates itself, there's more space. So the camera can keep going through and going through. And in this journey, we've discovered real China today. So we're situated in this kind of idyllic space that seems to be some kind of mythical, Chinese, classical. But as the camera goes through this maneuvering of the architecture, you see contemporary China unfolding. So there is this kind of back and forth, virtual time to real time, the virtual self-differentiation of the space, creating actual possibility for the camera to go through. So that is that operation. Yeah. That makes no sense.
Absolutely, and fascinating. I hadn't understood the work quite in those terms. And the idea of the camera, of course, itself is actual. It becomes this sort of this progression of one actuality towards another actuality. In the virtual.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Needless to say, I'm sure that art history has been an important factor for you in thinking about your work. Yeah, but I wonder if you can speak to the question of your interest in other practices and, I guess globally speaking, art history itself.
Right. Other practices outside of art.
I was thinking of art, but if there are other practices, and you've just talked about the importance of design, perhaps you could speak to practices that interest you.
Clothing, architecture. Well, it is back to the question of what an artist do. Artists, I'm fascinated by many artists who do some things very well outside of art. For example, Yves Klein was a judo master, very accomplished. And in his time, he was actually the highest rank of judo practitioner outside of Japan. So in that world, he is known as a judo master. Or Greg Kernel, who was a very accomplished cyclist, right? And of course, some of these instruments, like the bicycle, feature in his art as well. And also Yves Klein's idea of the body in space, I'm sure is informed by his practice in judo, that the body for some moment is free from gravity. Okay? So I like the really kind of interesting this sort of crossover. When I work with grad students, I always look for these moments. I'm sure everybody likes something else. It's not just about, the work is not just revisiting art history, although art historians like to just kind of contain it in that way. But artists who do many things, and their personal history and the other interests always infect the work in ways that you know. And I think it's very enriching to pursue those. I always kind of ask my students, like, what else do you do? What else? Sometimes it's a really beautiful experience. There was a student who was interested in cooking, but she didn't declare it as a relation of art, which is not. So just cooking. And finally at the end, when she passed her exam, we went out for drinks. It's a kind of celebration. And she disclosed to me that she came from a kind of a Mennonite background. So the idea of service is very important. I mean, I really, these moments are so dear to me, you know. And, in terms of my interest in other practice, like architecture, clothing, or even, I have an interest in mystical ideas. You know, like what I just said about this Buddhist metaphor, for example, is one of my interests. But artists really is not just to make art. Artists, for me, I'm more now interested in the performative role of the artist. Artists has to make art, but they have to make a life. First, for that kind of art, they make to function. So artists have to create a form of life first. And building this house is, of course, is a work. Choosing the right clothes is a work. And so this is my environment. Like the virtual model I built in my animation I just mentioned, that was a fictional environment, but this is also actually realize a place or a way of being for me to function. You know, I mean, there's a deeper, there's something deeper in that. Of course, is my position ultimately. Your way of life is your position. Yeah. And I'm especially fascinated by certain kind of, maybe the Chinese classical model of the artist in retreat. Artists, you visit some Chinese gardens recently, right? You know, they are built with that sort of sentiment or motivation. It's this idea of retreat. So this house here, and a lot of my work, and the idea of virtual has something to do with that position. The house is still in progress, but I think at the end of this year, 2017, the form will be there, because outside will be a line of stream. So there will be a veil. It's a grey veil around this house. So it's like a stealth house, but right in the middle of the city. Yeah. So this idea of retreat and realizing that here as a work, as a way of life, perhaps. Yeah. Not so much about making this or that art objects or project, but make a way of life. Yeah. Yeah.
One way of understanding a way of life, Jan, if I can move back into what we sometimes call culture, I'm kind of curious as to whether you find yourself in your own practice working within a general cultural framework that we could call it zeitgeist or a dominant discourse or however one might describe it.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm kind of curious if you've thought about this larger framework that perhaps your own practice responds to or
Right.
perhaps refutes.
Well, I think the position of retreat is a statement against. How do you kind of step on the edge? You know? Yeah. I remember very early on, I questioned. I was training in painting, and I think you recall seeing some very old paintings I did with this exhibition with Gordon LeBret, the white painting. I was showing this white painting. They were like a fold in the wall. It's just very thin and it's reflective, you know. And even at that time, I was kind of young and thinking, this is 20 years ago. Painting can say so much, you know. There's so much to say, always saying something. And anything is more or less equal. You can paint a tree, or your dog, your abstraction. What if you just not say anything? You just resign painting, you know? To make it less than painting, perhaps. Less than, yeah, this idea of retreat, right? Or the virtual. So painting is something you name, but you can't name. It's not enough to qualify it as painting. But it's not painting. So I guess my position in the art world, this psychis, is something like that. You know, I'm in, but I need to create my own oxygen. Right? Certainly, there are aspects that I'm totally uncomfortable with. I don't go to art fair. I'm just, you know, it just feel very strange. My body reacts to this sort of situation. I don't go there. Somebody can do this. I know that's what it is now, you know. But to be always be out there, to be in the spotlight, you know, you might want to make some room for something else to happen. Just step back somehow. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, whether my position of retreat has something to do with this psychis, yes, I think so. Yeah. It can be formulated that way as a reaction, but in another sense, it's just who I am.
Dare I ask what your thoughts on the art system are?
It's you know, when we hear this news that so and so is making millions of dollars in the art world, you know, there's auctions, art fair. In my immediate circle of friends, no one is part of that. So we feel like it is us. You know, it's not. You know, just that system is abstract. But people I respect, the artists I respect very much, they function, they function, you know. So I mean, I'm not going not to be seduced by this kind of fiction. To me, it's fiction. I mean, I'm not there. I'll never be there, perhaps. And it's okay, you know. We talk as if we are part of it. That's the problem, a lot of times. But we're not. You know, we just do what we do. But then someone is making millions of dollars, which could happen, but I don't know anyone. So I don't comment on that. It's just something I don't understand. You know, I was talking to Louis Jacob about a few months ago because I read this article about renting a space in Art Basel. Just to rent a space is $500,000. Just this little booth, okay? I don't understand that. What you need to sell, plus your whole entourage and so on, there's just no meaning to me, you know, that sort of thing. But it's not real. I mean, I like living with art. So I just function in the way I know. In terms of commenting on this big question of what the art world, art system, it's like I'm just saying I don't understand. It's not what I need. It's probably not what will make me happy to be a part of that. But we in Canada, we have the Canada Council. You know, I have my day job, so I think we can function quite well. Yeah.
Art theory has played an enormously central role in practices over the last several decades. I wonder to what extent theory has been an important factor for you.
Actually, I think very little. I think my work has theoretical implications, but I don't read theory that much myself. You know. I have more philosophy than theory, and yeah, these days, you know, since my injury, I don't even try to read anything anymore. I read comics, you know, I mean, Tintin. You know, I like Tintin. I don't know. Yeah. I feel I'm quite behind actually. So, I know I have to be on top of things because I'm a professor, you know. But yeah, when you work with grad students, they are quite happy that we don't go there. You know. I mean, there's other articulation, other forms of intelligence for the work. It's really to find a language for your work that is appropriate, that fits your work. And theory sometimes help and sometimes mislead you, right? So I think, yeah, I was more inclined to theorize my own work when I was much younger, because I felt I had to. You know, that's the language. You know, you want to take part, you have to speak a certain language. But well, I'm more and more relaxed about that. You know, maybe I have less and less illusion of success. You know, so you can speak about it the way that it should be. Maybe. No, I have. I can't recall the last art theory book that I read. Anyway, so maybe I don't have much to say about this. Yeah. Although I do like philosophy.
Any particular school of philosophy? Of course, Buddhism, I guess.
Yeah, and certain philosophers I like a lot. Wittgenstein, Henrik Bergson. I read them as poetry also, right? So it's just for pleasure, I think. Yeah, certain philosophers.
And literature.
Yeah, some. Kafka, for example. A lot of Japanese literature. When I was lying in the hospital bed, I read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It was great. The Great Gatsby was great. I hated that book at the beginning, but finally I get it. You know, it was just someone who can construct a totally vacuous and meaningless world. With literature, it works. You know, just despise all the characters in there, because everything they do has no consequence. You know, how can they live? Well, they're there to live. So that's just it's for pleasure. I mean, I don't read things that would kind of fit into what can I use for my work. And maybe when I was younger, I was thinking that way. Oh yeah, I gotta read things because they're useful. For me, it's just what I like. And I just like reading stuff that gives me pleasure. And I think art theory doesn't give me as much pleasure as these other things that I enjoy reading.
I remember talking to Ken Lung many years ago, and I asked him what he was reading. And of course, this was in an art theory class. And to my surprise, he said, murder mysteries.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And it's also interesting. Sometimes I talk to artists about this, what they like to read, detective novels and so on. Surprise. In fact, Wittgenstein himself is a big fan of detective novels. He doesn't read philosophy very much. He didn't think it was that great. Not much value to him. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Straight from the master.
Yeah, straight from the master.
Yeah, it's impossible talking to you not to imagine that in one respect or another, perhaps in an anti-respect, comedy must play a role in your thinking because you have this incredible sense of humor.
I didn't know that, but thanks anyway, I take it. So, comedy, oh God, I don't see it in my work. Maybe when I'm just talking to the camera, it starts to become funny. But do you see that in my work?
I see the potential for it.
Maybe the last work in the one I was supposed to realize in China, with the blank sign. There's some humor in there, but that is the Trojan horse to get into the system, right? To kind of fake this lie. Or there's another project in China, which I converted a donkey in a donkey cart. It's meandering kind of mobile art space. So yeah, somewhat, but it's not a strategy I use, certainly. Some artists use humor as a strategy, very successful. But for me, it's like whatever circumstances I bump into is what you need. If humor is required, then yeah, you kind of use it. You know, it's more pragmatic. Yeah, it's not the foreground as a motif in my work. Yeah, as some artists.
There is a playfulness, though, and perhaps it comes out of this sense of retreat that you were talking about. A sense of antimony, perhaps, a sense of standing back and playing with that relationship between the foreground and the background, absence and presence.
Playfulness.
Almost like a game.
I didn't think about it, but why not? No, I have the. It's nice that what you said, but maybe the use of mirrors, reflections, deferring of space, and so on. It's funny because I was supposed to design a garden with a friend for this project in Quebec. There's a garden. They invite artists to do work there, and the theme this year is play. And a friend of mine, Alexander Lee, he said, well, that's not what I think about your work. So let's not do it yet. Right, there's no play. But I was up for it, you know? I was totally up for it. So anyway, so we didn't do it. It's not something that so that's where I stand. If there's a chance to play, if it's required to get things done, I play. Yeah. Maybe you kind of like this. It's what you meant by playfulness. You know, sort of moving between positions or realities.
Given the complexity of your projects, of the work, I'm kind of wondering, just what you expect with respect to the public when they encounter the work.
It's baffling a lot of people. You know. Well, the problem is no one spends enough time on artwork in general. Right? I mean, to understand the operation in one of my animations takes a bit of time. And you have to imagine also what is really happening beyond what you see, the logic of that, which is not always declared. You know? Yeah. So it is, I think, a waste of time to expect something from public because you just don't know. I don't know what will come from who, and I always appreciate it when someone spends time with what I do. And it's odd that because there's certain Chinese Eastern motifs or sensibility is quite evident in my work, but it was never received well in China. Never. Because it's so removed from the everyday grind of the contemporary China. For me, it's interesting because I didn't grow up in that environment, so I've always worked with a kind of a fictional, imaginary China that I read about in literature, poems, or stories, and so on. The position of retreat in China is almost impossible, right? Yeah, unless you have a huge amount of money. Yeah. So I never knew who will look at what I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have no expectations.
Yeah, you teach. You've taught for some time. You're well known as a teacher, as well as, of course, through your practice. What do you get out of teaching?
I get a lot. I get a lot from teaching. First of all, I'm involved in the future in some ways. You know, we are more or less trapped in our time. I mean, artists maybe if you're on the spotlight, maybe 5 years, and your generation today is shorter and shorter, maybe 10 years. But, you know, because I'm in this sort of teaching environment, and I can have some maybe impact or influence, or let someone in the future influence me at the same time. And students sometimes ask me, do I get ideas from students for my work? And I say, no, I don't. Sorry, you know. But I get more than ideas. That's not about ideas. I get energy from students. You know, I mean, a lot of times I come home and I will tell my partner that, wow, I can't believe I got paid to go there. You know, I will pay to go there. Someone paid me to do this. So yeah, this kind of optimism, right? And also working with students, you get to know the story of the person and the work, especially grad students. When you go to see art in the exhibition, you see the art. Sometimes at the opening, you see the artists standing next to the work, but you don't know what's behind that work. Working with students, just duration of 2-3 years, you get to know them, and you get to know the kind of deeper logic behind the work. You know, that I appreciate. Not often we have that access. You know, I mean, certainly you won't get that in the discourse today. But to see that, I think certainly is a privilege. Yeah, yeah. And you help shape that into an expression as a teacher. Right? So I get a lot.
Yeah, you just raised, at least by implication, a question of what we can assume gets spoken in the public domain, and that of course leads to two particular important roles within the art system, within the reach that artists have towards the public. The curator on one side, and the critic on the other side. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on the role of curating today on one side, and the degree to which criticism seems to be continuing to play a role itself.
Well, I think that I think very little about this, so it indicates that where I stand. I almost don't call curators up. I never did. You know, someone looked for me, and yes, that's great. Someone actually interested in what I do. Yeah, I don't want to say too many things. It's becoming negative, you know. But that's how it functions, and that's why I know how it works. If there's support for what I do, I will just happily receive. But the important thing is artists create the autonomy. And artists could be, artists could be a critic, or write a different kind of art criticism. Like what you guys are doing now with this project, really is an artist project. Artist curates. I think artists could be patron, yeah, which recently I started to do. Yeah. So. Anyway, I never enjoy studio visits, like curators. It's like this job interview, you know. I mean, it's just, I think curators go to people's home and drink a wine or something, and that's what they do. But it's just so kind of frame the conversation and the routine. So I almost don't need the system to function. You know, I mean, sooner or later when this house is built, I'm going to open it as a project space, and I'm going to curate my show with artists I like. So that's the oxygen that I need, I think. Yeah, just retreat. Maybe. Yeah.
Of course, when it comes to that, you also write on art yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, is that because you feel that there isn't enough writing about art from the critical establishment, Or is it because you think that artists can write about art in a way that perhaps a critic can't?
Well, there's not a lack of art writing out there, I think. But I really think artists have a different access to art. And not many artists write, that's the problem. It takes time, it's challenging, it's an arduous process. I happen to enjoy it, but it's different periods. I used to write a lot more. And I thought I'd like to write about the people I like, the artists I like, the work tends to be not championed by the art world. They're not. So I feel I have certain obligation to kind of talk about their work. Yeah. So yes, artists certainly could have a different voice, a different way to write about art. Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm not sure how to frame this, but when one writes about art, I'm kind of curious about this from your perspective, Jan.
yeah.
When one writes about art, do you find yourself writing from a generalized frame of reference that you've developed over years that informs a particular perspective on that which you're writing about?
Yeah. No, that's why it's every time it's kind of challenging because I don't have those. Maybe I do, but I'm not aware of it. You know, maybe something is working in my unconscious, but I don't know. When I write, I really want to find a language that fits that work. So it's a trial to find that language. You know, what is that language for that work that's right for that piece of article? You know. So I need to, every time we need to think about, spend a bit of time, you know. I think it's important not to impose any kind of predetermined framework, to turn something particular into general. You know, I mean, certainly few pieces of writing I publish, there's no theory in that. Most of the time I talk about how the work is made, what's the operation behind the work, what does it do, you know. So that takes time, but I enjoy that, and I think that's required by the work. You know, you have to be, when you write about work, usually it's people I know, or people I feel that they need to be spoken of. It's a way to express some gratitude for that work, that it exists, that practice exists. You know. For example, I was very interested in a French, you can call him a painter, André Cadere. And very few people talk about him. He was the same generation as Daniel Buren. Of course, Buren is a superstar. And Cadere is, I think, just as interesting as Buren, and no one talked about him. When I was living in Paris for a bit, and I hear his name, becoming curious, you know. And there was only one book that was ever published. And when I came to York University 10 years ago, I went to the library just to see what they have. They actually have that book in the library. I took down from the shelf. No one has ever taken it out. It was sitting there since 1995. So 10 years on the shelf. That was 2005. So I thought, I have to write about this guy. You know, I need to speak about him, at least for my students. Yeah. Because that moment I became, I'm a teacher now. There's some obligation to the future, and there's some obligation to the past. So it was called for that moment, you know, and I don't just write. Sometimes people ask me, then it's very generous. So it's kind of hospitality, you know. I mean, then I write, you know, so on. So what am I talking about? So that's the motivation of writing, you know, sort of in and out. It's not something I do for a living, or I'm not known as an art critic. It's just when there's a moment that's called for.
Maybe a couple more questions. You use technology yourself, obviously in the work,
Yeah.
Jan. But of course, technology has also become part of the lingua franca, part of the mode by which we live today. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the extent to which technology has become so much part of our lives as artists, and of course also as members of the society. Do you have any sense of the import that this technological framework we work within, whether it's social media, whether it's high-end video equipment, or any of these things? Do you have any thoughts about the role that technology plays today?
Well, it's actually scary and confusing, you know. You have to know what to participate in, and certain I don't get seduced by the novelty of it, you know. I mean, I started using a cell phone very, very late because I realized in China we couldn't function without a cell phone, so I was forced to use a cell phone. Even I appear to be a very tech-savvy kind of person, but you know, it's just what I need to do. I resisted moving into virtual reality with this kind of device because it seems to be a logical thing for me to do. People always ask, why don't you do that? You know, no, I don't want to do that because I don't like to lose yourself in an environment. I like to be addressed by artwork face to face. You know, I don't like to escape somewhere. You know, until recently I found a way in. Then I agreed to use it. So there is a call. I was invited to do a commission work with virtual reality. I told them I have no interest in it. They said, fine, but try it. So for me as an artist, when you use a medium, I'm responding to your question about technology, but as an artist, whether it's paint or whatever, you cannot use it just as a tool. If it's an artistic medium, you have to use it against itself until you find that way how to work against the medium. So it's not just a tool to deliver results. Then I can work with that, right? So finally, with virtual reality, I found a way. So I agreed to do this project. And social media and all of that, yeah, YouTube, and sooner or later it was novel, and it has some use, but I mean it's just you get seduced by it too, and it's just I can function. My friends are not on social media. I can still have this very close relationship with them without social media. With Instagram, they are used. Sometimes they're very useful to promote certain things. But I do use it not to promote my work. But Instagram, I like to post images to see how my life becoming this sort of collage. You know, that's how I use it. You know, in general, I think I'm skeptical, and I think we overvalue these things. Facebook and Instagram, but they have some use. I don't use them as artistic medium, you know, or YouTube. But unless I find a way, if someone invite me to do a project on YouTube, then I'll think about it. You know, how to kind of subvert it somehow. Yeah. How to make YouTube more YouTube. How to make Instagram more Instagram. Yeah. So, but unless there's some occasion for me to invest energy in those questions, and it's just there. If I can find some use of it, yeah.
My last question for you, Jan, is a bit tricky, given that in some respects the dynamic of what you've been discussing the last little bit would seem to offer already an answer to the question, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. And I wonder what you can do with it. There has been, as you know, of course, from your teaching, that there has been a gradual erosion of the idea of originality has been called into question, both on the level of theory and, you might say, on the level of cultural expectations. And so it seems almost old-fashioned, perhaps, or to miss the point somehow, to ask the question, what is one to make of the notion of originality today? Originality is often also considered within the framework of authenticity. What is authentic, what is inauthentic. And somehow one has the sense that these questions are now becoming old-fashioned. But I wonder, old-fashioned or not, whether you have any thoughts about the question of authenticity.
Yeah, this is curious. I don't think about it in my work because I have different criteria. We talked about that already. I mean, there was a discourse of simulacra or appropriation some decades ago. And I think some of those works great, you know? Like those Sherry Levine, the photograph, just rephotographing the I think they're really great work, you know. I think it's original. Oh God, Lichtenstein appropriating the brush mark, you know, this brush marking. I think it's just great. So I don't know where originality lies in these kind of work, because I think they're extremely original. But they position themselves as kind of like a mockery or secondary type of. It's appropriating someone, you know, they're not original, but they're extremely original. So that sort of deflated that question already. What is original, you know? But the authentic question, is it authentic to the soul of the artist? Or what is authenticity when you in the studio? Where do you ask that question? Maybe I ask that question differently. It's whether I see myself in the work and so on. Perhaps it's a more oblique way to ask that question that could be more meaningful for me to function. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that kind of question of originality, I think it's deflated. It's still there when you see an original work, even though it's sampled from past work, you know, it has a way to make it original, and you see it, and it's you know, yeah. Although the discourse could be about appropriation, sampling, which is about ready-made and so on. There's bad ready-made. There's really good ready-made. There's really good sampling music out there. Very good sampling art. That's wow. It should be like that. You know, it could work. You can see the future in that. So I think we don't ask this kind of question in the abstract, whether originality is good or bad. You know, I mean, it works good. You know, if it's yeah. You know, I mean, some artists are laboring in the studio, pouring their soul out, and to me, it's just the work of it's a work of labor. To me, it's nothing original about that. You know, so we'll have to determine through the work itself what those questions, the real value of those questions, patch on what the work is actually accomplishing.